to a show.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Off the Mats Podcast. This week's episode, I am going to welcome a friend to the podcast and friend of mine. He's been on a few different times in the past, and we're going to welcome him back this go around as well. Sorry, this is a bright and early recording for me. Normally, I'm just getting up and moving around, so I apologize. So for this episode, we're going to be welcoming back our good friend Raj to the podcast. He is the operator and facilitator of Open Talk on Instagram and website, correct?
Indeed, I am. Thank you for having me back on. This is my third time back on now, so I'm very happy. And obviously, we're here to talk about mental health during this time of the season, I believe.
Absolutely. I appreciate you making the time to be on, especially this time of year, just with the holidays and everything being around, and you know, it's just tough. So
yeah, no, of course, it's a big opportunity for me. Like coming on Off the Mat podcast is a big opportunity for me, and I appreciate it. So thank you for having me back on.
Never a problem, my friend. So with this time of year, again, just being what it is, you know, it's a festive time. It's family time for a lot. But, you know, for so many others, for one reason or another, it's not necessarily the happiest time of the year, or even, you know, the most anticipated time of the year for, you know, for what some make it out to be. And I even can say for myself, as much as I love Christmas and, you know, have my daughter now, and she's so excited for it, this time of year still kind of bogs me down just a touch. Yeah. But, you know
what? It was so weird that you messaged me and you were like, I would like to do a podcast about mental health this time of the season, because I remember a few days before that, me and one of my mates, we were talking, and he was saying how this time of the year is normally when he's like down, feeling a bit upset. So it's like a seasonal thing for him. So we don't know whether it's seasonal affective disorder or not, but I feel like this time of the year, a lot of people, even people who may not have any mental health issues, go through like mental stress, with like mental health problem. Even I was like, it's weird because like if I look back in previous years, it's always this time of the year where stuff gets difficult for me. And I was wondering, why is that? Like, what is the reason that too, where people experience more mental health issues during like the winter season compared to other seasons? And I think it really comes down, one of the main factors that I thought on top of my head was that with winter, we associate with, you know, spending family time, being with family, connecting with them, staying indoors, because obviously it's cold and stuff, whatnot. And then during summer, we associate more like going out, enjoying, going on holiday, stuff like that. And I feel like, especially in the modern world nowadays, I feel like a lot of people, more and more people are now like disconnected and feel more disassociated with their family. And they may not have someone they could go to or someone they could spend Christmas with, which I guess can play a part with when it comes to like mental health during this time of the year. I know about you, but that's just something I thought about initially when obviously you asked me to talk about mental health during this time of the season.
Sure. And I do agree that, you know, that can be a huge factor, you know, especially as the years have come about and we've got more social media to kind of get more stories from individuals, you know, where, you know, you might have someone who's just estranged from their family, you know, whether it be they're the black sheep and they just, you know, never feel like they're part of that group. You may have individuals who family wise, you know, may live their lives differently. And the family just says, look, you know, don't bother coming, or the family welcomes them and it's just very uncomfortable. And topics come up, whether it be intentional or not, that make the individual feel unwelcomed. Um, and
Hmm.
then, as you said, with it being these colder months, especially if you're in the northern states or country,
Yeah.
you're indoors. You're not really getting a lot of sunlight, and that's instrumental in how we feel. So, those are some things that kind of sit at the top of my head when I think about this time of year. And again, even for myself, I think it's definitely seasonal, weather based
Yeah.
here. Because I woke up yesterday, just
Mm.
it was a nice day. It was a nice looking day. My daughter came into my room, woke me up. She's excited just because she's 6.
Yeah.
6-year-olds are excited about anything. The wind blows a certain way,
Yeah.
and they're like, "Yes, the wind's blowing."
Yeah.
But I got up and went to work and just felt, I wasn't miserable by any means. But I was just like, ugh, man, this is,
It doesn't.
you
It's
know,
not. It just doesn't feel right. No. Even the weather here is so weird. Last week it was like -2. Today it's like 10 degrees. Like the weather definitely do not help mental health because there are studies which shows how weather correlates with mental health and stuff. And the way the world is going right now, it's definitely not looking good.
no, it's troubling, at times when,
Hmm.
I've been putting up on my Instagram a bit more lately, just talking about depression,
Yeah.
mental health, suicide awareness, things of that
Yeah.
nature, especially just, I know one of the bigger news stories was a gentleman who was on the Ellen show, Twitch, who had taken his
Oh
own
yeah.
life. Yeah,
It's actually crazy because I'm doing my masters at the moment, and one of the modules is it's like professional practice, so it's looking at using counseling skills in a professional setting, and we did suicide risk assessment, and that lecture was very eye opening for me because I felt like, okay, this is something that professionals should learn, but I feel like it was something like everyone should know because the main long story short, the main point of that session that I learned is take any sort of hint of suicidal thoughts, or if someone feels like they're going to be suicide, even when someone goes, sometimes people are, oh, I want to kill myself, and some people just bat an eye to it thinking, oh, they're just saying that. It's like you should take those things seriously. And coming back to this season as well, I feel like it goes up, that suicide rate, which is really shocking because recently I've been seeing a lot more stories of suicide, and it's for various reasons as well. It's not like just there's a single cause of suicide. It's like bullying. I'm seeing a lot more kids committing suicide because of bullying, relationship breakdown. Um, I did see the thing about that guy Twitch, but I'm not sure what was the reason to suicide. But it just shows like even celebrities, like no matter how famous or rich you are, happiness doesn't come along with it.
I completely agree with that. And I think, well, I will say this as far as Twitch goes and the Ellen show and everything that comes with that. I'm not terribly familiar, but
Mm,
I know that it seemed, it was very impactful because, the show was wildly popular, and,
yeah.
individuals that I've encountered, you know, brought it up to me. Like,
Mm,
did you hear about Twitch? I was like, I've seen the story, and then I let them know, like, it's unfortunate, but I have to be honest, I'm not terribly familiar with his work or the show. Just, not out of disrespect or anything. It's just I'm not familiar. But the few things that I was able to see about it, it was unexpected,
yeah.
which in most cases, that's how it goes. It's unexpected, and when you again, just look at, people think, oh, well, they're a celebrity, they've got all this money, they got all this notoriety, fame, and, that doesn't equate happiness, you know. He's a hard worker. That's something that we all strive, to be, and we admire, and that's a good thing. But it's, I think sometimes with people, we have other things going on inside of us. Whether
Mm,
it's you feel like you're a burden, or whether it's you feel like you know you'll never amount to much, and that's just a crazy, unfortunate thing about it is, you see the celebrity, and
mm,
this takes place, and there's no, like, pointing fingers or blaming or anything,
yeah, yeah,
and that it's just this moment where you want to understand, um like I said, looking for the, listening for the signs, if somebody
mm,
makes mention of something, but also it's not always that cut and dry either. Sometimes people just, there's a post that I have here in my queue, and it's celebrities, it's Robin Williams, it's Twitch, to name a couple, and they're smiling and says, "This is what depression looks like," and
yeah.
you just never know who's dealing with what.
Exactly. I've actually got a news article about Twitch's death, and they asked his grandfather about it, and his grandfather said 2 days before he actually committed suicide, he spoke to him on the phone, and he said he was the same happy-go-lucky person that he's always been. We had no indication that anything was out of the ordinary, and I think that's important to consider as well, because suicide is something, it could just be out of nowhere. Like today, someone could be happy, the same person. Tomorrow, they could wake up with something on their mind that could just push them to the edge to do something. And that's important to consider. And that's like a constant reminder, to check in those people who are quiet, to check in on those people who may have had history of suicidal thoughts or attempt of suicide, that you may think, oh, they're over it now, but there might not be. It's still in the back of the mind that's playing, because people with suicidal thoughts, they are good at putting a mask on. They put on an act where they may look happy, they may look fine, but they're not. And I think like histories of like famous people committing suicide have shown that, because there've been like days, like there'll be like a day before where they might be on a TV show, they might be doing an interview, or they might be on their social media looking happy, and then the next day all of a sudden they've committed suicide out of the blue. So things like that is important to consider.
Yeah, that's kind of the case, especially when Robin Williams uh passed. It
Yeah.
Everyone, he's a comedian, he's a comedic actor, and always put a smile on everyone's face. And with that, I almost feel like, with when that happened, everyone,
Mm.
it was like everyone lost, a family member, everyone lost an uncle, a dad, just like how that was connected to us as fans. uh, I you know go back and forth with a friend of mine, as we all lost a friend several years back, and we were
Mm.
just talking about it over the weekend. We disagree on the circumstances. He believes that the friend you know took his own life intentionally, and I just don't believe that that's the case. But that's just the thing. When it comes to suicide, you don't know. I mean, I spoke with
Yeah.
this friend, an hour before or hours before it happened. I don't know when
Mm.
exactly, the time of death, but I spoke with him, at 2 in the morning, and we're on the phone, and we talked until about 3:30 a.m. And he was gone hours later. And
Yeah.
in our conversation, we made plans for the next day and everything. And those are the types of things, though, that can happen. You know, They're making plans that they'll go to the grocery store, buy kitchen full of groceries, pay their
Mm.
bills, do everything like normal, and then unfortunately, you know whether it's by that thought, or it's just they're carrying on like normal, and then it happens.
Yeah,
But it's heartbreaking.
it is. It is. I remember I was like 5. I had an uncle, so it was my mum's brother. He committed suicide. At the time, I, I didn't understand the concept of suicide. Didn't know what was going on. All I got in my head was that he took his life. But then growing up, the more I found out, it was more like he was suffering with depression. He was going through his own family problems. He felt all this guilt and betrayal, and he couldn't take it anymore, so he took his life. And obviously, it didn't affect me as much because I was young and I didn't understand it. But then looking back at how it affected like my mom and like family members that was close to him, it shows like the value of life, and it shows how important it is to try and support those as well. Because to be honest, so my uncle committed suicide while he was in jail, I believe. He was falsely imprisoned due to some situation, and he did it then. And obviously, he had no support network. He had no one to tell him or support him through that. So that was the reason why he took his life. But it's important, like I keep on saying it, but it is important to check in on those who you feel like might be at risk of suicide and stuff. And something else that's important to consider that I've learned is suicidal ideation. So that comes under the professional practice thing, but it's looking at like how often someone thinks about suicide, how intense their thoughts are, and how long they have these thoughts for. So these 3 things are something you might want to, if you know someone close to you, say you have a friend or family that who is at risk of suicide, those 3 things are important to consider. And then it's also important to consider how you can support and divert those thoughts as well. That comes under like protective factors. So you want to think about what factors could you use to help them escape these thoughts and stuff. So like examples of protective factors comes under like giving them reasons for living. They might have children, or like make them feel like they belong in a social group. They might have people who depend on them. It's just like these little things. They do not think about it in a moment, but if they just have someone over their shoulder that reminds them of these things, it's a way to bring down that risk.
That's very important there to understand that, as we encounter friends or family in our lives, that it may, sometimes, again, it's not always obvious, but if you get a feel or a sense, someone just seems a little blue, I guess, for lack of a
Mm,
better term, and you just want to be there. Those points there that you just gave us are very important to know and understand. um,
mm,
I I have a friend who I've been speaking with lately, and they've got a lot on their plate right now,
mm,
and sometimes I think we both fall into this category. When I first started going to therapy, my therapist asked me, one of the first questions was, on a scale of 1 through 10, you know, how suicidal are you? Something to that effect. That is, the wording is definitely butchered for sure. And I says to her, I'm at a 2. And she goes, well, why not 1? I was like, well, I don't want to kill myself by any means,
mm,
but if something happens, I'm not going to fight it. I'm not against it. That was 12 years ago, you know. Uh, and, I have a friend, I think, as we talk, and everything that's kind of falling down on them right now, especially, you know, they've even kind of said it, outright. It's like, I don't want to hurt myself by, any stretch of the imagination. But if I didn't wake up in the morning, I wouldn't be mad at it, you know.
Yeah.
And it's scary to hear things like that from a friend, especially someone that you care about, because when is that switch from I don't want to harm myself to it actually becoming what they feel like is the only option.
Yeah. One of the reasons why I do what I am is because, like, growing up, I've been in different situations. So a situation that I spoke about in my friend's podcast was like I was with my mate. We're like 14, I want to say 13 actually. So we're like 13, and obviously we're in secondary school. He was in a relationship with a girl at the time, so young love, whatnot. That girl she had her own problems from a young age, and that stemmed from like family stuff. I think her mum passed away when she was young, so she had all these issues going on at such a young age. And I remember we were having a sleepover, and his girlfriend messaged her friends like a long paragraph, hinting at she wanted to take her own life type of thing. And we know she has a history of self-harm because we've seen marks on her arm and whatnot. And we received a message from our friends saying, yeah, we think she's going to self-harm, or even worse, might take her own life. We ran from my house to her house. We did it really quickly, and then I remember knocking on the door, and her dad answered the door, and literally I was out of breath, and I had to tell, oh, what we think is trying to self-harm, whatnot. And then the dad had to run upstairs, check in on her, stopped her. And yeah, so there's like situations like that growing up. Even at a young age, hearing that, you might think, oh, it's silly, whatnot. But like, anyone at any age goes through that type of stuff. And yeah, it's like situations like that, And like, there was another situation where this person that I knew, I think they were like 15 at the time, so I was a bit more older. They were younger than me. Their partner broke up, and I remember I went to go meet them because they said they were feeling very upset, whatnot. And I remember they had a bag on them. I looked into their bag, and there was like loads of paracetamol. And like at that point, I was very scared because obviously I'm probably like 16 at this point, and I had no idea what to do, whatnot. I was just trying to talk them out of it, trying to calm them down. And then finally, once they were calmed down, I sent them. They went home. They were fine. But like, it's just, yeah. So like, growing up, seeing stuff like that, it makes you realize how important and how overlooked suicide is in a way. Because I feel like some people don't look at these signs. They don't know how to deal with it, whatnot. And yeah, it is scary. Like, for example, like your situation with your friend. Like, luckily, I haven't experienced anything where I was speaking to someone, and then a few hours later they've taken their own life, because I can't imagine how hard that would hit.
With my friend in the past who unfortunately lost his life, again, for me, speaking with him, he was, we've talked about it before in the past, he and I, and um, anytime he called, I was in a rush to get there. There was one night he called and he said outright, I am not feeling okay.
Mm.
I think I'm going to do something, wrong. I rushed out the door to my car.
Mm.
Somehow, some way, I didn't close my car door all the way, so the light was on. and the battery drained. And I'm freaking out. So I run back in the house and I call him and I tell him like, look, man, I'm trying to. I just called a cab. I'm trying to get to you. And we talked for about 15, 20 minutes. And he says to me, you know what? Don't worry about it, dude. The fact that you're trying this hard to get to me helps a lot right now in what's going on.
Yeah.
And at the time, foolishly, I feel like, okay, cool, everything's good, and left it at that. Now that night, he was perfectly fine. After the talk, we carried on. And, kind of looking back on it, it's like, despite him telling me, don't worry about it, I should have still caught the cab over there, because it could have gone horribly wrong. But in the instance that, I spoke with him hours before he actually passed, for he and I, the conversation again, I was watching UFC. I invited him over. It was late already. He was like, dude, I'm really tired. I don't feel too great. And normally I would tell him like, dude, come crash on my couch, but he's a wild sleeper. And my living room was cluttered with a lot. So, I'm thinking to myself, man, I don't need him over here kicking my shit over. Like, nah, man, stay home. And, kind of looking back on it now, it's like, man, I wish I would have, had him come over. There could have been all the difference in the world. And the reason why my other friend believes that he took his own life is that just a week prior, he had stopped by just randomly. This friend who passed, he had stopped by our other friend's house and hung out with him all day and just really opened up and talked about a lot of dark stuff. And then he stopped by my house right after that evening. And he and I talked for about half an hour outside, just sitting on the car. And he seemed a little different, but, nothing was alarming. And, the week went on, like normal, we text, we talked. And then that Saturday night going into Sunday, he passed away. And, the other friend said, after we talked, he explained everything that took place in their conversation the week prior. And that's what led him to believe that he had taken his own life. My feeling on it is I'm not saying that he wouldn't have. I'm just saying I don't think in that moment it was intentional. This friend did have a drug problem, and I wonder if it was accidental that in those hours. Again, I'm not saying that what the other friends' conversations with him were doesn't lead wasn't something alluding to potentially taking his own life. I just don't think it was in that moment that those feelings were there. So I don't know, it's really hard when it comes to the ideal of suicide and where we are, especially as a world, because like I said, we have a lot more media on it, social media, regular, traditional media, mainstream media, if you will, that shines a light on it. But, then the questions that I start having is, with this rise in it, is it considered a rise in suicide, or is it only looking like a rise because we have the media spotlight on it now?
I think it's definitely a rise in suicide for sure, because there are different factors that I think now play more of a part than did previously. So, for example, like the COVID actually like shot suicide rate up by a lot, and we might think as a society we're moving forward, but I feel like coming towards mental health, yeah, there's a lot of media spotlight on it now. There's a lot more people speaking up for it, but the issues are still there, and there are issues even rising. Like, I can't believe I'm saying this, but in 2022, bullying is still a big thing. Racism is still a big thing. Homophobia is still a big thing. And it's crazy because it seems like it's getting worse, to be honest. And I feel like there's more, maybe, yeah, media is showing more of it now as well, definitely. Because in the past, there have been cases where people may not know about at all, like you said. But yeah, I feel like there is definitely an increase, and there's just more and more factors playing into it now.
Sure.
Um,
In
yeah,
the bullying point that you bring up, I think is a very strong point that has always been something that's there. I remember asking my wife, as we were watching some movies from the 80s one night, and, I know the world's a big world, so everyone's experience varies. But
yeah,
as I'm watching, I can't remember what we're watching. And I says to my wife, it's like, I wonder if bullying that we see now was a product of the movies, saying this is what bullying is. And,
yeah,
people just started to emulate that, or if someone saw this experience and put it in a movie, um, because I remember growing up and being picked on myself, and it was
yeah,
never anything like, you see in the movies. It was, like little subtle things, that kids would pick on you about, like whether it be, your clothes not being, a specific brand, or
yeah,
um you know we're all awkward at that stage in life, being little kids. So, you might have your feet grew faster than the rest of your body, so, you're getting picked on because of your feet, or, you got big ears or something, and you see, this thing with bullying that kind of carries on. But I feel like as the years kind of moved, into the current, you started seeing more children taking their lives because of the bullying, whether it
it's
be from classmates or even from their own parents.
it's actually, I actually can't believe I'm saying bullying is still a thing, because I remember when I was in school, so like 6 years back, um, it was there, it was evidently there, and I thought maybe as society goes forward, because there's been changes, like obviously like with like BLM, more awareness in the LGBTQ and stuff like that, there will be less of it. There's more and more, and in the UK as well, like I don't get it. It's like they think it's cool bullying people. They record it. They record them bullying people. They post it on their social media, and then they'll caption it, be like, "Oh, look at this pussy or whatnot." And I'm like, it's not cool. It's disgusting. And I was like, what goes through their mind to do it? Because on whilst they're recording the person they're bullying, that person inside is having so much like thoughts building up in that moment, and at any point it could just get too much for them and cause suicide. It's actually, just, yeah, bullying is just something I can't get my head around, honestly.
I agree. It's a weird thing because, like you said, when you're in school, not too long ago, and then I was in school many years ago, and it was a thing then. It continued to be a thing. It's still a thing. And I have a friend. Whenever we talk, you know, they well, it's not an all the time thing that comes up, but when the topic of bullying has come up, they believe bullying is necessary, and I'm like, I don't know about that. I mean, go tell that to the parents who lost a child to suicide
Exactly.
because their child was bullied. Go tell that to the individual who's harming themselves right now because of being bullied.
Bullying.
And
Exactly.
I think that falls into that pocket though, where our experiences, we can't see outside of our own bubble. We can't see outside of the world that we've come up in, in our little communities where we're like, well, that was never a factor for me. So, you know, or I'm tough. I dealt with it. Everyone else should have to deal with it, which I can't wrap my brain around that either. It's like just because you went through a bad experience doesn't mean, everyone else should have that same experience.
Yeah.
We're all built different.
And another thing as well, I'm seeing, I don't know if there's a rise in this, but I'm seeing a lot more kids with like needs are getting bullied. So I'm seeing more autistic kids getting bullied. Like it's just unbelievable, like what people think to do stuff like that. Like I'm seeing videos of kids who are clearly suffering from autism getting bullied because of their needs, or getting bullied because they're just easy to pick on, and it's just ridiculous. And stuff like that, just it's just, I don't know. It's
Yeah,
it's just a hard topic to get my head around. I don't get it.
absolutely. Well, it's like you said, with the amount of awareness that's out there, you would think that this is something that's no longer an issue because of our awareness, versus now it's almost like and maybe it's that the awareness being there has kind of helped, but again, with social media, everyone having a camera at their disposal now, we see it more now than, and it could be kind of in those waning moments where, possibly the awareness is there and it's bringing it down. I also think about here in the US, when you look at like, you know, southern states and middle America, stuff like that, where there is, sometimes this ideal of, again, like, people say, well, back then we didn't have all this autism, nowadays we have it, and we didn't have all this stuff back then. It's like, well, maybe we didn't have the awareness of it then. Maybe we didn't understand it back then, versus now. And and sometimes that carries into the bad attitude carries into affecting someone, where someone's going to say, oh, well, this rise in suicide, everyone's just soft. It's like, no, I don't think that's the case at all. I think, a piss poor attitude towards people who need someone, that's a contributing factor. So you can't say, oh, well, they're soft because they feel this way, they feel that way. What it really comes down to is just have some compassion and care.
Yeah. Another thing I want to touch upon on as well. Earlier you mentioned about drug problem, about your friend who had a drug problem, and I feel like that. So I'm a very anti-drug guy. I'm anti-weed because growing up, I've seen how weed affected people mentally, financially, socially, and physically. Like people, uh, people think weed is the go-to thing when they're like stressed, or like when they want to chill out. But drugs and like stuff like weed is what it adds on to that stress, because it gives you that mindset where you just think about nothing but that constant problem. You may think you're escaping it, you think you're escaping reality, but what it's actually doing is it's giving you a reason to think more about the problem in hand. And a lot of people nowadays forget how drugs can play a part in that mental stress, and even worse, can push you to suicide, because once you're addicted to a specific drug, that could be your go-to way in the future to then overdose and take your own life. So things like that, if you know someone who's doing drugs, or like, or you've noticed that they have got into a habit which they normally don't, then it is something to think about. And also, I know I've been saying, when it comes to like suicide, there's stuff that we can do to prevent it, but I'm not saying we have the key to like prevent suicide. What I'm saying is, like, if we can notice the risks early on, then there is something we can do about it. We can, it's easier to talk them out of it. before it's too late. Because, for example, I knew someone who was very suicidal, and when I had people messaging me through open talk, one thing I like to go through. So my go-to protective factor is when someone says, "Oh, I just want to take my own life." What I say is, okay, who is the person that you care about the most, or who is the person that you're closest to? Normally, people would say mom. Some people would say like younger sibling, and I'd be like, okay, put. I would be like, put them in your shoes. So, say it's your younger sibling that's getting these thoughts. What would you tell them? And then they would be like, oh, I tell them you shouldn't be saying stuff like that. You shouldn't think about suicide. And I was like, there you go. I was like, that's exactly what they say to you. But then there was this one person where I was like, okay, if your younger sis, younger sister, was having these suicidal thoughts, what would you tell them? And they were like, I'll tell them to take their own life. So at that point, I realized, okay, this person is too far gone for me to help, and that's when you have to, call for help. That's when you get professionals involved. So what I'm saying is if you can notice the signs early on, then yeah, there is something that we can all do about it to stop that. But then if it's too late, then you probably need to get a real help, emergency involved.
Um, and that point there that you just made, I think is important. Though we, want to be there for our friends and family in these moments of crisis, we also have to understand that we're not professionals. And like you said, if they're too far gone, we need to really then look into getting them someone that can you know better assist and help them, because I think about that with my buddy. One of the things I said to him, like, because I mentioned we've had this talk before, he and I, and one of the times he flat out said he was suicidal. um and this isn't related to the time that my car battery died. This was the time even before that, when we were younger, well, much younger. And he mentions it, and selfishly, I thought to myself, after the fact, and I go, well, if you kill yourself, what the fuck am I gonna do?
Mm,
Like, because this was my best friend. I told him, I was like, what the fuck would I do if you kill yourself? We'll fucking be a train wreck. Like, don't fuck around. And
yeah.
looking back on it, I feel like that it was kind of selfishly, you know putting the attention on myself at the time, and not even really thinking about it as something that might even contribute to his wanting to take his life,
I think
because no, go
that
ahead.
that is a very common thing, where when someone who's thinking of suicide, even I'm guilty of this. You'll be like, oh, what is this person going to do without you? What's your parents going to do without you? What's your siblings going to, what am I going to do without you? But I think we say that out of panic, and I think the most important thing is to let them know why they should live on for themselves, why they love themselves, what they have achieved. um if you can make them realize the importance of themselves, and then it's okay to be like, think about this person, that person as well, because it's it comes under like self-love as well. Because like I say to a lot of people, is if you can't love yourself, how are you going to learn to love others? So like someone with suicidal thoughts, they clearly don't love themselves, so they're clearly not going to care about other people as well. So if you can teach them that self-love first, then you can go on to about loving others. But it is a common thing where you'd be like, oh, what am I going to do? Because I've been guilty of it many times in the past now. And yeah, it is. I understand how you feel as well saying it, like if you have that guiltiness now and whatnot, but we all say it in good heart. We say it thinking we're going to help them, but we just don't know what they're actually going through in their mind.
Yeah, the panic part actually when you said, I was like, oh yeah, I was definitely in a panic, when he and I were
Yeah,
having a conversation. Yeah, and that was the first thing that came to my mind. I was like, dude, like seriously, like I can't imagine, you know, what comes next when you're not here.
mm,
Um, you know, I think also, where I wonder at least, you know, with individuals who may, suffer from depression, or I don't want to say suffer, but live with depression and have, the suicidal thoughts, is this, something that, is there a genetic marker, that can,
yeah,
pass down, and even if it skips a generation, goes on to the next. Again, I have a friend, she has children, and they're approaching their teenage years now, and one of the children, they're just, she's like, you know explaining with this one that they're just very, she's concerned about them at times. They don't want to do anything, they don't want to interact with anyone, and they, the child has, you know even said themselves, is like, what's the point of me going on, what's the point of me doing anything today, when we're all just going to die eventually, things like that. And I know the mom, you know has, knowing her from childhood, she's, kind of going through those thoughts and feelings as well. I don't know if she's ever said these things around, her daughter. I don't imagine she has, but it got me thinking about, is this something that, can carry on in genes as well?
yeah,
I don't know. This, this topic is always a heavy one.
mm,
Just you know, when it brings back thoughts, of, personal individuals that we know in our lives, celebrities,
yeah,
that we know, and even people who we know now may be going through some troubling times, and then you think to yourself, how can I help?
yeah.
Um,
It is when talking about suicide, I think there's so many different factors you could consider, and like we spoke about many already. Um, Another one that I want to touch upon is culture as well. So with me, I've been trying to do a lot more work with mental health within my culture. I'm from a Tamil community, and I feel like if there are any Tamil people listening, mental health is very, it's like overlooked and not much education done in within our community about it, because from within my community we come from a very difficult background where there was like a whole civil war, a lot of people died, um, there was there was a big genocide within our community as well, and mental health is something that's not educated, whatnot. And recently as well, um, uh, back home, so in Sri Lanka, um, there have been a lot of suicides recently, actually. And I remember last year, one of my sister's friend's brother, he committed suicide. He hanged himself. And I remember I went on. My sister messaged me, and she was like, "I need you to report this post." And I was like, "What's that?" And someone's actually posted a picture of this person hanging, and I was shocked. I was just like, "What on earth?" It's like
wow.
I just couldn't believe it, and it just goes to show how like they don't find stuff like this sensitive within my community. And I say Tamil community, I can even branch that further to South Asian community, because I've been doing more and more work on it, and I'm having people from like whatnot, like India, from like Pakistan, um, just like other people from different from the South Asian community telling me I can relate to this so much. And it's just crazy how, like we were saying earlier, how overlooked like suicide and mental health still is. And this is one of the reasons why I'm still trying to raise awareness within my community, the Tamil community, because we come from a background that's gone through a lot, and there was no education done, and I feel like generation kids from my generation, sorry, are being affected by it because the older generation, there's a lack of awareness. They don't know how to react to it. They even contribute it themselves. They add pressure and stuff like that. And suicide within my community is definitely going up as well, 100%. So yeah, it's just crazy. It's just crazy.
So when you mentioned the elders, the older individuals, who I guess with everything that your people and your culture have gone through,
Yeah.
Do they kind of embrace it in terms of like talking about it and being kind of a support group for each other, or is it
So
more like like as you all are aging now and the younger ones are
yeah,
growing up, are you all
yeah.
taking the lead on it?
I think what it is, I spoke about this with my mate actually. We were saying how like our parents went through so much, way more than probably what we've been through, especially because there's a whole war going on in Sri Lanka when they were growing up, and they've lost their loved ones, and many more, and because they didn't have any education, any support group on it, they just learned to like brush it off their shoulder type thing, and like some are affected by it, but they're probably not aware of them being affected by it. So now that they have kids now, so when the kids are going through a similar thing, they don't bat an eye to it. It's like you know what I mean, because they went through it, they didn't know how to deal with it. So when they see other people dealing with it, they don't know what things to say, what not. And like there's our common like phrases that you would hear within our community, and a big one is like so I made a post on it actually. um um Common phrases that you'd hear is stuff like so if like a kid went to their parents saying, oh, I'm feeling depressed, whatnot, they'd be like, oh, you're not depressed, you're just weak-minded. Another one would be like, you don't need to get treatment because other families will look badly upon our family. um if a kid was to go to their mum, for example, saying, oh yeah, I think I have depression, or I think I'm suffering with this, they'll be like, oh, don't tell your dad because it'll become a big problem. Some parents would even be like, go as far as to say, oh, you're just faking it, and stuff like that. Like it's actually a big thing, and it's crazy because the amount of like South Asian people that agree with me, and I'm sure there's other like ethnic communities that agree with me, because I remember seeing a post within like the Nigerian community, for example, where it was so similar and stuff like that. But like I said, I think within like my community is something that has no awareness, no education and whatnot. So that's why I'm trying to like talk more about it.
Sure. And that's important that there is someone trying to bring awareness and be vocal about it, you know because if it's just kind of pushed down and just locked away, it's only going to get worse.
Yeah.
um and yeah, I don't know, different communities, different just groups, they all have, we all have our traumas,
Yeah.
that can affect us moving on, but that doesn't mean to ignore it or to say, well, you know just don't talk about it. Don't mention this to this individual.
Yeah.
My one friend once told her daughter, who said, I think I'm depressed, and she was like, you're not depressed, you're just sad. That kind of falls into that thing of like, the parents just kind of like, no, it's not that. It's not that.
Yeah.
Shh. Like
Important to take
it's
these stuff seriously. Like you may think, oh, they don't mean it. It's still, you have to take everything seriously. In my opinion, now that's something I've learned over this year
mhm,
as well.
yeah. Uh, I put up a post not too long ago on Instagram. And I've seen the meme worded differently over time, where it's like it says your friends would rather hear your complaints than to attend your funeral.
Yeah,
And in other versions of it, I think it was your friends rather hear you complain than to hear your eulogy. And I had someone comment, they wrote a pretty nasty comment, so I deleted that and just blocked them. I
mm,
was like, we're not doing this, buddy. And I had another individual make a comment, and you could hear, I could sense the sincerity in his comments. And he was basically saying, I kind of disagree with this, and as he's opening up about it, he's basically stating that from his experience, you know, people may say this, but they don't mean it. And he gave examples of his own. And I sent him a personal message, and we talked for a little bit.
yeah,
And very very nice young man from what I gather with the conversation. And you know, it just in that little bit of a back and forth that we had, that there's this feeling for me at least to take it serious. You know, I don't know if this guy's a troll or not, so I'm going to shoot him a message. And you know, he and I had a good back and forth, and I think we both really expressed some concerns just with ourselves and what we see in the world, and in terms of mental health and suicide awareness. And I'm glad that I got to have that conversation with the individual.
yeah.
I've been checking in on him once per week, just to see how he's doing. Because
That's good.
again, like I said, take it serious. There's more things you have to take serious. And and I know for some they might think, well, why burden yourself with this or burden yourself with that? And it's like, well, I mean, and that I think that's part of the thing right there is we have this thought of it being a burden. And
Yeah,
I personally don't think of it that way. I know I've had people kind of express to me that they're concerned, because it's like, look, man, you know you're doing this and doing that for this individual, you know but where does it end? And it's like, well, it for me it doesn't, if it's a friend especially. So
definitely.
i I don't know. It's frustrating. Yeah, I guess for me, when people kind of have this insensitivity, especially this time of year. um so but hey, we'll get there. We're learning, we're
Yeah,
growing, we're learning. And we'll
hopefully, yeah.
we'll definitely, I think, as a society, we're moving in, I want to say, the right direction.
Definitely a better direction, but the issues are still there.
Yes.
And yeah,
Well, Raj, I want to thank you again for doing this with me and sharing your
of
time and
course.
making time. um, I
Yeah.
always kind of joke a little bit whenever I have you on. I'm like, you're like my own personal therapy session on the podcast. You're my personal therapist. Even though I actually have therapy later this afternoon, so I get a double whammy today. But uh, I can't thank you enough for this, man. This
No, of
is, I
course.
think, is
This
important.
this
Very
is very therapeutic for me as well to have this type of talk, because you don't often get the chance to have chats like this, and obviously get to talk about mental health, spread awareness, continue what I'm doing. So honestly, it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me on again. I appreciate it.
no problem, my friend. Before we get out of here, any shout outs or mentions you'd like to leave us with?
Um, all I gotta say is just follow Open Talk on Instagram _Open Talk. I'm still posting. I'm going to be doing stuff to do more with my community because yeah, I'm trying to spread awareness. And for my master's project, I'm doing a dissertation on mental health within my community, and it will be looking at other communities as well. So please follow, look out for that. And yeah, that's what I got to say.
Absolutely. And, I'll put the link up in the show notes. And
Yep.
whenever you post, as soon as I see, the post from you with the color scheme, I get excited. I read through it, I save it and mark it all
Yeah,
for a future repost. Uh, so always look forward to your post. So
appreciate that.
thank you. Um,
Thank you.
and as always, everyone else, thank you for listening. Thank you for the support. We do appreciate you. If y'all have any questions, concerns, criticisms, feel free to reach out to me at bjj.wiki on Instagram or Off the Mats Podcast on Instagram. I'm I'm all over Instagram, so you can find me at any of the many accounts that I have. I'd like to give a big shout out again to our guest here, Raj. Um, you can find him on Instagram at underscore open talk on Instagram. And the link
Yeah.
will be below if you all, or not below here, but below on the show notes on Instagram when I post the episode. Also, as we're having this discussion of a very serious topic here, I'd like to also just mention, if you are feeling you know like you need someone to talk to, you're in a tough spot, uh, don't be afraid to reach out. Hell, if you're listening to this and you're one of my friends and you're going through something, shoot me a message. You know, and my phone's always on, and I'm a night owl, so you can catch me at just about any hour, literally any hour. I'm available. Also, if you're going through something and we're not friends and you don't feel comfortable reaching out to me, uh especially when it comes to the thought of suicide, there is the here in the US, the suicide prevention lifeline. You can reach out to that as well. It's 1-800-273-TALK, or if you need the numbers for that, 8255. So don't be afraid to speak up, don't be afraid to open up, and don't be afraid to talk. Otherwise, thank you again, everyone. We love you. You guys keep listening to the show, and we're going to keep making them. Thank you, everybody, and bye.
Deeper with it. Now let me sing a song.